Hi, Leanne, and welcome to Spiritual Talk on a Thursday afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Yeah, this is a bit unusual, isn't it?
I know it's a little bit exciting.
Well, so season two, Spiritual Talk, we thought we'd change things up. We thought we'd do something for the last half an hour. We'd try to do different modalities. And when we sent questionnaires out to people asking what they would like to see, there was a gentleman that was mentioned by quite a few people. They'd like to hear some of this particular philosophy from this gentleman. I'm going to introduce you without further ado, because I don't think you've met this gentleman before, Leanne. He was on the Spiritual Talk. I think it was Monique and I that interviewed him, and he blew us away with his knowledge of spiritualism. Let me introduce you, Leonard Tatt. Hello, Leonard.
Hello. How you doing?
And welcome to Thursday afternoon on Spiritual Talk.
Thank you.
Pleasure. So I was just explaining what we kind of wanted to hear some of your philosophy and some of your ideas. And when you was last on the show, you blew us away with your knowledge of spiritualism, spirituality. And one of the things that's been going around in my head is, what is the purpose and practice of mediumship? And that's, you see people online today, I'll get a message here, do this. It just seems to have lost all soul or meaning out of what mediumship is meant to be.
What a great question. Something that I've been thinking about a great deal over the past few months, because I think it's something that we need to look at within spiritualism. We've heard for so long now that spiritualism is about proving life after death. Well, for me, it isn't. And then you'll get this talk about proving, life that is trying to inspire us to live before we die. And there's an element of truth in all of that. But I think that the real purpose is much, much bigger than that. That what we are encountering with the phenomena of spiritualism helps us to realize that the spirit permeates everything. That there is a level of consciousness that is universal. So we'll see with all the phenomena of mediumship, basically that we're connected. Whether that's psychic, whether it's connecting with people that are that are dead, and Zoom is proving more and more that these things know no boundaries to distance or presence or anything of that nature, and that realization that the spirit permeates everything really is an experience of God, because it's that spirit that's behind absolutely everything in life, and behind every single religion. And of course, the problem that we've encountered is that spiritualism is fast becoming, a tribal religion. In other words, we have the truth, and that mediumship is, the be all and end all. Well, of course, if that spirit is permeating everything, then it is in every avenue of life, and will come to people how and where they are. So it comes to people when they're ready. So lots of people come into spiritualism when they've lost someone. So when they're going through a time of crisis, someone's died, or there's been a breakup of a relationship, or whatever it is. So in other words, it's transformational.
Yeah.
And once we realize that process of transformation comes through the difficulties and the challenges of our life, or through crisis and grief, through our difficulties, that spirit is trying to overcome our ego. And when we center around, our mediumship, the idea of proving life after death, it becomes my job to prove that you survived death. Well, of course, I can't do that.
Yeah.
It's the spirit that's permeating everything that is trying to connect to you. And I'm a part of that. So being a part of that, I can work in the flow of that energy, if you like, or in the, the presence of that spirit to help that transformational process. But it continues a long time after mediumship, after a message has ended. It will continue in every facet and aspect of your life to try and wake you up to the presence of that spirit. In other words, to live spiritually. And the goal of the goal of spirituality is not to develop mediumship, is to live spiritually. And that's something that absolutely everybody has got. But it's something that's happening in every, aspect of life. If you look at all religions, all religions are teaching exactly the same thing. Love your brother and your sister, live as if this moment matters. And I think that that's becoming far more relevant to us during the lockdown and COVID. We've realized how fragile life is. So what we're encountering in that spirit is the realization that life and death are one, that they're actually part and parcel of the of the same moment that we're experiencing. So in each moment we we die and we're reborn. We often get these arguments about reincarnation and what reincarnation, does it exist? I love St. Francis' idea of reincarnation. He said that we're reincarnated every morning, that we live this life now, today, in this moment, and then we die at night to be reborn again the next day. The problem that we have is that we take all of our baggage with us. So we take what happened yesterday. So I've got a grievance with this person. I've got an argument that all those inner arguments with ourselves. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. But if that spirit is permeating everything, it's love. Love is at the center of the universe. And that really is what it's trying to teach us, is that you are a loved being who has access to the universe. But more importantly, that universe is living in you. So in other words, you are the divine in miniature. You're an aspect of that divine. So you and God are one. So what the spirit is trying to teach us is that we have to be stewards of our world. So we've got to look after it well. And that, of course, is becoming very evident with global warming, the crisis that the planet, is facing. And sometimes we can play glib messages, with this. So what I mean by that is I get quite annoyed sometimes walking around supermarkets where they have food bank trolleys at the end of it, and you think to yourself, you're still throwing away all this food at the end of the day, but you want me to put a tin that I brought from you in a trolley. So sometimes we're paying lip service to this truth rather than actually living it out, and helping people in a constructive way. And when you're living in the presence of that spirit that's permeating everything, which is God presence, if you like, then your life becomes a living prayer. And then you are emanating that healing in absolutely everything that you do. And that makes all of your life exciting. Even a walk to the shops where you might encounter this, image rather than substance. But you could also encounter the most amazing spiritual people who could change your life, because what are you encountering in others? That same presence, that same God, but where they are.
So can I break this down and go back to where we started in terms of how this reflects on mediumship and how that... So in essence, what we're saying here, that mediumship is only a part of this massive, bigger piece of everything. Of the divine aspects of ourselves. And yes, and a lot of mediums that I've worked with, and including myself, I feel responsibility to try to prove life after death. That's my ego talking. And we have this responsibility to try and prove, but actually we are missing the point, aren't we? We are missing the point.
In demonstration, what we're doing is we're opening ourselves up to that presence. And it's always, we used to talk about mediumship being an experiment. What they really meant is that we can't guarantee anything. What we're doing in that experiment is we're opening ourselves up to that presence, and that presence will manifest as to how well we create the atmosphere, the conditions, the environment, and how open we are to that loving presence to be able to flow through us. And that's mediumship. The flow comes from the divine through us, and it's got to establish itself or be creative, if you like, in the world. It's trying to, and this is one of the problems that we have, like, for instance, with healing, that we often try and get this ultimate, idea of what health is, which is an ideology, rather than actually realize that the point is that flow comes, where it will and how it will. Sometimes people are more whole in their brokenness. if that makes sense. That we are sometimes more who we are because of all those difficulties we've had, or even because sometimes I'm so scared to work with this mediumship, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's important and because I want to know that presence.
Yeah.
That's healing. You know, once we realize that, then we can still be people that get it wrong and that, you know, aren't completely physically able, or sometimes have these mental and emotional blockages that, you know, seem as if they're going to get in the way of that flow, but they never can, because that loving presence creates all life and is moving through all life and is always restoring it back to what is this, you know, wholeness, which is where we get that word holy from. So we realize that if it's an experiment, it doesn't matter whether we get yes, no, or whatever. What matters is that we're open or vulnerable to this transformational process, which is making us more loving, more tolerant, more kind, more human. And that's what that presence is after doing. That's healing. It's not about being able to, you know, be 20 again, because I never can. You know, it's about being able to live in this moment fully and completely, able to do all that I can and feel that presence, loving, caring, nurturing, and comforting me in every way that it possibly can. And sometimes it comforts us more in those difficulties and challenges. Why? Because we don't reach out for anything when we're successful. That's the ego. We only reach out for something when we're in crisis, when we're in these difficulties. And that's why people come to, you know, to spiritualism, is because they want that comfort and they need that presence, which is God. But sadly, because God's been so, you know, painted in such a bad light in so many ways, whether it's through terrorism and there's all sorts of forms of terrorism, isn't there?
Yeah.
We don't talk about God enough, and of course, you know, it's life.
I know, and that's the issue right there. There's, you know, God, the word God itself has its own connotations to people, and it suddenly brings up a negative. You know, if you call it the force of life, rename the word, get rid of the word of God.
What they used to call in Greek philosophy the transcendental. So if you could, you know, change the word God for anything that would fit. So whether it's truth, whether it's beauty, whether it's, you know, whatever it might be, the transcendentals, and I can't remember all of them, the 7 transcendentals, but there are other names for God. This power that permeates all of life and that fills every crack and space with wonder. And it's working through absolutely every human being in one way or another. The problem that we have is that people, or the ego, shall we say, likes to claim truth. I've got it right. I've got the truth. And we see that in every religion, that every religion claims that it's got ultimately the truth. And it's the same with, you know, with spiritualism and mediumship. Spiritualism does not own mediumship. Mediumship or mysticism is there in every religion. It's even there in atheists. It's even there in agnostics. It's even there in children, you know, but we don't name it or perform it maybe in the same way, you know, as spiritualism does, but it's still there. It has to be, because God's there, and God doesn't make rubbish. You know, it's human beings that spend all their time, you know, making these things look ugly. They're not meant to be. They're meant to be full of joy and wonder and, you know, and all those things that make life worthwhile. And that's the purpose of spiritualism, is to help us to realize that.
So okay, I'm sort of sitting on the fence here and playing devil's advocate a little bit. Is there a place for mediumship within that?
Absolutely, because otherwise it wouldn't happen.
But it leads off all in different places, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
you said, you've got mediumship, you've got healing, you've then got all your other modalities that are out there, like yoga and all stuff like that. It's just all part of, it's all facets of the bigger thing.
And we see this, you know, in these facets in things like art and poetry and, you know, and all, you know, theatre maybe, because they're all leading us to this truth What spiritualism is doing is helping us to understand that connection. It's helping us to understand how it works and what it does. It's helping us to realize that we're not just individuals. The cult of the individual has changed society beyond recognition, and now everybody's after their own their own success and their own. This is one of the problems that I have sometimes with this idea of manifesting. All I've got to do is be in the right frame of mind, and then the universe wants to give me a great big pile of cash. But sometimes that could be a bigger problem to me than just actually realizing that I'm connected and I have all I need now.
So would you say like spiritualism is, to me, when I think and look at spiritualism, I think the whole thing just takes you back to the power of the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was going to be my very next point. No, but it's great how it works. It shows that power's working through us, because when we're talking, that power's at work. That power's trying to to bring us a message, and that's mediumship. And the message is that you are an aspect of that, divine power, and that you have to make a difference to change this world into a better place. And that's mediumship. And sometimes that journey started by people getting a message from a loved one that makes them think. It started by somebody working psychically, and somebody's thinking, well, how did they get this information? They've never known me before. Where does it come from? And it's that process of making us think, making us wonder, making us explore and investigate and find out that actually is the transformation process. And again, if you think of when somebody dies, we spend a lot of our time thinking, well, where are they now? What's happening to them? How are they living? And mediumship helps us understand that. Yeah. And the point with it is that if you actually don't look at one of those aspects of life, you miss so much. It's like spiritualism. I can't look at Christianity, but then you miss all the wonders that Christianity's brought to the world. I'm a Christian. I can't look at Buddhism. And yet Jesus, lots of what he says is straight out of Zen Buddhism. I'm a Buddhist. I can't look at Hinduism. It's absolute nonsense. We should be looking at absolutely everything, because God is there. And if we look there, we can find something to wonder at.
Is it because as soon as you say God, you straight away think of religion? I mean, hands up, I'm probably what hindered me most. Because I can remember a few times I've seen like the Jesus figure stand in front of me 3 times in my life now. It's almost like you're smacking me around the face. But if you say religion to me, I've looked into all different bits of religion and I can appreciate it, but I'm not a religious person. No. So as soon as somebody says that, like I used to go, but you say unconditional love and light, to me, I'm open.
But this is the whole reason why the Jewish people had this wonderful idea that you never spoke God's name. Because if you start speaking about it, our minds then getting involved, and we don't understand what's the ego or what's opinion and what's truth. But also, by the same point of it, let me try and explain something to you about how close this is. Because the Jewish people, the way that they wrote, they always missed out the consonant. So an educated person would have to add the consonants to a word. But the word of God, which was Yahweh, is spelt in such a way that it's the only word that you can say in Hebrew where you don't close the mouth. Okay. And if you actually say that Yahweh, it's actually the sound of the breath. It's the breathing in and breathing out. So God is as close to you as the breath. Now you actually find this same idea, in Hinduism or in Sanskrit, where sohum, which again is the same principle, that the sound of the breath makes this noise. So we're breathing in and we're breathing out. And actually in Islam, the word Allah, and I'm not an Arabic scholar, so I can't explain it to you too well, because there's connotations to the A, the L, and the L, and so on. But basically, the idea of Allah is so it's the very breath. So what we're seeing in all of these religions is the very breath. So God is as close to you as the very breath. Now, the idea of, behind that, we know in spiritualism that everybody dies on an out breath. So your spirit goes on an out breath. And so the very last word that you say and will ever say is God's name. And this is the reason why, crying is soothing to babies, because they're actually listening to the name of God. They're listening, to this, presence, which is right at the heart, of their being. And we see that again, if you read Genesis, the breath, ruah is spirit. So the spirit hovers over the chaos and cosmos or life comes out of that chaos. And that's what we see in spiritualism, is this hovering of the spirit, so that this cosmos or this, order starts to come out of life. And that religion, which actually religion is a word that means tying back, or it means, to do something religiously. So again, I'll say to people, I brush my teeth religiously. So it's doing something again and again and again to realize how far away you've been from your true self. And your true self, its very essence, is linked to God. And we know that, if you looked at somebody that was violent, we say the violence is inhuman. So they're so far away from being who and what they are, they become inhuman. Okay. So the purpose of our life then is to become fully human, is to become fully alive, is to become this aspect of that divine reality in miniature, spreading that love and compassion and understanding wherever it goes, which sometimes comes about through mediumship, but that's only a part of it. Then we realize that if we're in that flow, actually our whole life is mediumship. And when we can do that, our life becomes a living prayer, and we can then actually influence people by knowing that and accepting them exactly as they are. It's like, for instance, if I get upset at what somebody says, that's because there's something in me that has not realized that yet, and that I'm reacting to it. You hear this all the time. Oh, so-and-so's made me feel angry or made me feel sad. Nobody can make you feel angry or sad. They're your feelings.
Yeah.
But until we realize that, all of those things are actually gifts, because they're helping us grow to an understanding that we are in this presence that will never let us go, that will always nurture us and love us and care for us, that will always give us all we need, maybe not all we want, but all we need, so that we can actually, spread that love and compassion wherever we go. That then makes life exciting, in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of gone off center a little bit from the original question, but I understand that we're trying to express God through our physical form and expression of God for ourselves. Where does it fit then, the soul's journey? Some people believe that we have certain things we want to achieve within that.
Yep.
How does that, so when people, I always think that the human experience is there to be experienced. So I've had people say to me, you're not supposed to get upset. You're supposed to be quite spiritual. Well, I'm not being true to myself if I don't express all my emotions.
Yep.
I don't.
That is part of the journey. It is, first of all, like, for instance, I grew up in a Roman Catholic family where you never mentioned anger. Anger was like taboo. And you didn't mention sadness, because, if I was sad or depressed, and somehow I'd failed. So you end up self-nurturing, and you end up, looking after yourself. Maybe mediumship comes from that going within yourself and, and finding your emotions. But that then knowing them and expressing them is the next part of the journey. We can't be one with the essence that is until we're aware of these things that, so for instance, betrayal makes me angry. Until you know that, you can't actually go past it or through it. So it's part of the journey of knowing your emotions, of knowing your, your feelings. But it's part of the journey, because in the end, those emotions, the deeper that you go, Buddhism is this wonderful, idea that the life is a little bit like peeling an onion, and that the closer we get to the, inner core of the onion, the closer we get to love. So love is the real essence of who and what we are. Okay. And I think what I'm trying to say comes down to the fact that our dual mind seems to think that hate is the opposite of love. It isn't. The opposite of love is non-being. Okay. Beauty, the opposite of beauty is not ugliness. The opposite of beauty is non-being. The opposite of good is not evil. Okay. Even within evil, the good's contained. God is beyond that. Okay. We contain good and evil within us. And if we go beyond that, we find that we're held by that being. So we get wrapped up, if you like, in the whole idea that I've got to be good. Okay. But what you have to be is you. Okay. So you then, once you realize that, and that if you're angry and you realize that you're angry, you can actually move beyond that anger by realizing that that's not who and what I am. And it's not what I want to express in this moment. And that I can choose a different way. And that different way will be better, not just but for me, but for other people.
Power of the moment.
Absolutely. And all of those things come out in the challenges that, because what happens in those challenges, that God that permeates everything is trying to get us to get over us. That whole idea of what's so important to us and what's so vital. I've got to prove survival. You haven't. You've got to be in the moment and let that moment express itself, and it will prove survival.
Yeah.
And just know, like, your next moment is not the same as your last, is it? So whatever you're experiencing at this moment in time, you can take a deep breath, let it go, and it's gone, because we're creating what we are here and now.
And that's that idea. There was Epicurus, I believe, he said that you never get into the same river once.
No.
It always used to be you never got into the same river twice. But if you think about it, because the water's different and you're different, you never get into the same river once.
No moment is ever going to be the same.
No. And all of your difficulties and problems are there to help you to realize that and to embrace that moment now and to decide what is it that you want to be. That's why all of the Gospels start with the idea of John the Baptist goes into the desert to learn what's good and evil so that he can choose the good. Jesus has this time of called the wilderness years to learn what's good and evil so that he can choose the good. You see it in Buddha sitting under the tree. He sees all these problems, and what is it that he wants to choose? And he chooses the good. He chooses something that's eternal because, if I hate someone, if I'm unkind to someone, it hurts me far more than it hurts them. It hurts me because I'm not then the person, that I should be, and I can blame them. But at the end of the day, I had the choice of, how I lived my life.
Yeah, I always have this thing, try my best, try and live each moment as if it's your last. That way you're living it for you, no one else. It's what's for your truth.
Yeah, but that's also having the courage to make mistakes.
Yeah, it's part and parcel of it, isn't it?
Because if you don't know, you don't know. And until you've made the mistake, that's why our mistakes are our biggest lessons. Because, and you see this, I love the work of Mel Robbins. You often see it with mediums that people think that confidence is about knowing they can do something before they get up and do it. It isn't. Confidence is about courage. Yeah. It's about the courage to stand up and do something because you know it's right, no matter what the consequences, and do it anyway, even if you feel the fear.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a great power in that. She talks about the 5-second rule, that in a moment you've got 5 seconds to decide whether you'll do it or not. And then it's like when you're standing up to give a message, all of those feelings come up and you feel that and you do it anyway. Mainly because you're not on your own. But
I always think that naughty feeling where you think, should you not? I always think that's a good indication to go do it, because If you don't, it's going to be a regret. And why have a regret? I'd rather go, I did it and it didn't work, rather than go, oh, I wonder what happened if it would have done.
Yeah.
And the problem, that fear then permeates everything. So you get the joy grabbers, and people will say, I want to do so and so, and all they'll hear from their friends is, oh, well, this will happen to you, or you can't do that because, or rather than actually get behind them and say, how can I help you do it? What is it? And that's that point a bit again about being in that moment. What is it that I can do to help make your mediumship better? And you'll see this with messages. You must have experienced it, Paul, where you come to someone and they cross their arms and legs, go on then prove it to me. Well, you can't. They're part of that flow. And if they're not part of that flow, they're actually impeding it. They're actually stopping it.
They'll block it.
I say to all of my clients, the only thing I ever ask from them is to be open and in the moment with me. I don't want anything else from you. I just want you to surrender and be present, because then you'll get whatever it is that your soul needs for this moment in time. But as soon as they put a block there or that, it's just, I always say it's a waste of both of our times, because if you put an expectation there, I can't hold up to your expectation. But your soul will know what it needs, so just be present and be accepting.
And then that's the other part of that, is the trust. The trust in that power. And I think that's what we're doing in mediumship, is we're teaching people to trust that power. That if somebody has survived death, that power has worked and somehow brought about its magic. And that trust is what leads to faith. We often like to think that in spiritualism we've got all the answers, but a message brings you to faith. You can't have all the answers. And it's sometimes searching for all the answers or thinking that you've got them causes all the problems. And we all encounter, that when, you describe somebody as being egotistical because they think they've got all the answers. We haven't. But and journey with people.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about being spiritual, or spiritualism, is the fact that you could spend your whole entire life and many lifetimes over, and you will never know it all, because there's constant so much to learn, and there's always different ontakes. And like when you get people come together and you see the magic of different things, it's always mind-blowing, and you can never get enough.
And this is the whole reason why, if people have got that trust and that surrender, they can often display better mediumship than the most learned and experienced mediums, because it's natural. It comes through trust and surrender. We often cloud all these things with our words. We cloud all these things with an intellectual endeavor, and actually forget to realize the simplicity of it, which is close to you as your breath.
I watched a lecture. I think it was Mavis Patilla, and she was saying the same thing. When she first started, her mediumship was so natural, but then she started being guided by certain teachers that were saying do this, and then she ended up getting up one day and realizing she's not doing this. She was describing what somebody else had told her how to describe it. It wasn't free flowing.
And that then becomes more difficult the more you progress, because you turn up, you're not meant to be as good as you were last time. You've got to be better. And so people, rather than actually allow you to live in that moment and express that moment, they've got their expectations or what they want or what they desire. And this is often why, if private readings go wrong, that's the reason why our expectations or our desires have got in the way, rather than actually being with somebody in that moment and sharing it with them, and having the joy of that moment become fully alive.
Yeah.
Here's a question, Leonard. Again, slightly off what we're saying, but isn't. We have a lot of people that approach us that are in crisis. And we've just come out of the new year. It's always a difficult time of year. It's cold, it's January, everyone's no money. Relationships can be an issue for people. If someone is crying out for help and they're seeking that, what would you say to someone that is seeking that spark within them, or that help they seek? Is it naturally go and see a medium who might, or Gypsy Rose lay down at the pier and get your palm read, or is it, how do they find that inner spark within them? What would you do?
Well, there are lots of ways of doing this, of tackling, a problem. What we're doing in mediumship when somebody comes to see us is we're helping them see themselves fully. So mediumship, which is the mirror of the mind, we're opening them up to the realization that there is more than one solution. What we often, have with suffering is too narrow an idea of what we should do and how we should do it. And that often comes from those words we were talking about, or other people's ideas or impressions. So what we're doing, through mediumship is helping somebody realize that they can choose absolutely anything to do, and we're giving them courage to decide what it is that they want to do and how to then proceed. Our job as mediums is not to tell somebody how they should live or to judge them or to decide for them. It's to actually give themselves back to themselves. But within that, I mean, you need a spiritual practice, and that spiritual practice can be anything, but they're always about being in this moment now. So meditation is about being in this moment now. And if you can't deal with whatever problem that you're facing, being in this moment now can be very difficult.
Absolutely.
Because you've got to experience all the pain or the trauma or the, so you've got to decide, how to do that. But then there are other things that sort of take you outside of yourself, like prayer, and prayer, whether it's formal or personal, is a way of, taking yourself outside of yourself, or what lots of people say is letting God see you. So in prayer, that whole idea we've all got of praying for something, or a particular outcome doesn't work. What we're doing with prayer is we're letting God see us so that he can see all of those problems, and then God decides a way out. We're back to that whole idea of trust and surrender, that there is always a way out. And sometimes letting God decide can be the best option, because he will always get you out some way or somehow. That wonderful, mystic from Norwich, Julian of Norwich, used to talk about this. All things will pass. In all possible ways, all things will pass. Yes. So whenever you're in a difficulty, you can build that trust and surrender by realizing it will pass. Yeah. Okay. And that then builds our understanding of who and what we are. If you can't go it alone, find somebody to journey with you. That's the point of our spirituality, is to journey with people, to help them realize they're not on their own. And isn't that what the spirit world do with us? They don't come back to make decisions for us. They come back to say, I still love you. I'm still here. I know what you're going through. You are not alone.
That's how I tackle it.
Yeah. Okay. So I was a bit disrespectful already when I talked about the Gypsy Rosalie on the end of Clacton Pier. I apologise for any.
They too have their place.
They're not there anymore.
Okay. They do absolutely. But I want to I don't want to make this sound like this is a bit of a witch hunt against mediumship. Far from it, because it is a starting point.
Yep.
But there is those out there that also, and this is where mediumship gets a bad name from people. People are always looking for an authentic medium or someone they can trust, or, I've heard many mediums say some unusual things to people, which can be quite damaging. Yeah. For people that are listening tonight, how do they avoid that? What do they look for when they look for a medium?
Well, again, that comes back to that idea of experience. You won't know what's bad until you've experienced the good, and you can't experience the good until you've experienced the bad. So it is that process of discernment. What I actually look for is somebody who has an ordered life, is somebody who actually, for one, isn't searching for mediumship. As mediums, we're promoting God and the spirit world. We're not promoting, my work. It's not my work. It's like when you work in a church and they'll say, I'd like to invite you for your demonstration of mediumship. It's not my demonstration of mediumship. It's ours, and it's that spirituality that you'll see in certain people that will draw you, that will attract you. Your heart knows, as Leanne was talking about, your heart knows if somebody is trustworthy, if somebody is good. And if you think they're not, find someone else.
Do you know what? So,
that's all work, all
yeah,
areas, though, isn't it? Because like when I first start with somebody, I like to talk to them first, and I
Yeah.
always say to them before I proceed, "Do you feel connected with me?" Because if they don't, I'm not right for them. You're not right for everyone.
And I think that's very important. You're not right for them, but you're again not limiting their choices. What you're doing is say there are loads of people out there. You know, find the one that's right for you.
Yes.
You know, and you'll see this often when people are teaching students that they want their mediumship to be the same as them. What you then get are clones. I want my students to be a better medium than me, so I can sit and watch them. So I haven't got to work, so that I can, you know, be a student again. You know. You've got to be helping people be better than you are, or be all that they can be.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes we forget that, you know, because we need to make a living, or we need to, you know, make ends meet, or whatever it is.
It's like having a clone society, isn't it? And I don't. Our uniqueness is what gives us our own individual glow, isn't it? And I always say that when you have all these people, I do struggle with. I think spiritualism going forward, past has always been about these gurus and everyone following those. And to me, I just feel, this is personally, that when you do that, you're giving your light to them instead of shining brightly in your own unique way. And I think the trouble is people want you to go and follow them, do all their practices, do everything that they want to do, and then they reap the benefits and they become this bigger person, and you're just giving them, instead of stepping back and going, but I'm me, and I'm shining just as bright as you, but I'm doing it in my own way.
But within that as well, Leanne, a sign of a good teacher is somebody that would tell you to go and express yourself, and don't
There's
always.
Not many of them about.
Yeah, I mean, I know a few. There is a few out there, thankfully. There is.
Oh, yeah, there is people out there, but they tend to be under the radar because there's all these bigger people that people tend to think, oh, you'll only get the best training if you go that way. That's not the case.
Sometimes it's also a process. I mean, you know, Paul probably experienced this too, that you go through, you know, the process of going to a circle thinking this is it or this is the one, and then later on you're a little bit disillusioned by it because you see this is wrong, or you see that's wrong, or you see, you know, this needs to be done, and then you go off and find another one. If you hadn't been there, you wouldn't know that. So you've learned and grown from it, and you can sit there and you can be, you know, judgmental, or you can dismiss it, or become a victim as, you know, do you know what they do? They've actually helped you through the difficulty, realize what you need and what you want. So you've taken a step from it. So you bless them, take that step, and then become all that you can be. That's the process.
Yeah.
But it is interesting from a mediumship point of view. It's interesting, people that are on the learning journey, development journey, how many people aspire to be like Gordon Higginson, his mediumship. I mean, I'll be honest, I've also aspired. I like his spirituality.
Yeah.
And
there will never be a Gordon Higginson again. There was one. The world had one. All God wanted was one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
He wants one of you. He wants a Paul Bannister or a Leanne. He wants you just as you are.
Yeah.
You know, and we
You're
can learn.
Not just as big, aren't you? But it's seeing it. Is I think people allow this ego to take over them, and then just like, oh, I've got to be like that, and it's like, what's wrong with being you?
Yeah,
it's beautiful. Be proud and be like grateful that you're who you are, no matter whether you're big, small, whatever. You're you, and without you, you wouldn't have all the things around you.
And the balance of that, Leanne, that's the difficulty, is trying to find the right balance to grow, to develop, and trying to see what, you know, try to get into yourself, and that is the key. It's difficult. It's not always easy.
Yeah. It's trust.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we were talking about last night.
Yeah, I'm always talking about it.
Yeah.
But
love and trust.
Being that discerning and being able to bless someone, and it's, you know, again, I mean, my background's Christianity, but it's all there. Love your neighbor as yourself, enemy, and your neighbor. You know, love the people that are, you know, causing you, you know, all these difficulties, because you're learning from them. Yeah. You know, we don't want them. We've all got into this idea that spirituality is about overcoming every problem and every difficulty. That's that new age thing about I've got to be positive all the time. No, you haven't. You've got to be you all the time.
Exactly.
And if it's positive, wonderful. But if that's not what you're experiencing today, that's not what you're experiencing today. And it might be for a good reason.
Yeah. So many times people have said to me, if you could go back, what would you change? I wouldn't change one single bit. I've had some bad because all of it has made me who I am. And I wouldn't change that for the world because I love me.
Don't ask me that question.
But I think when you get to that point, I mean, like you said, any bad thing, it's like somebody said to me, I'd love to walk in your shoes. And I'm like, why? Walk in your own. Because that's the magic. We all have down days, but it's looking at it and going, this is just a blip.
It is growth. Of course, everything is growth in that respect. Absolutely.
But that's where spirituality is. It's that whole idea of I don't want your problems because I'm quite happy with mine. Often we want other people's problems, but when you get them, you wouldn't really like them that much. If you walk in your own shoes and you realize that individual essence of the divine has made itself its home in you, then you begin to realize, that you gain strength through these problems, that you grow spiritually through them, that you're always choosing, what you want to do in that moment. And that, of course, is that great Christian symbol of the cross. What will I be now? What is it that I want to experience in my life? Do I want to be all that I can be? And if I do, then, I've got to put the work in. I've got to put the effort in. I've got to surrender to this. If we sat and looked at the story of Gordon, people look at it and romanticize it. They'll make it this story of this wonderful medium. He wasn't always that way. I mean, he went off to war and he was sitting in circle at 2. Sounds wonderful now, but can you imagine as a toddler being made to sit in the quiet doing absolutely nothing?
Oh,
you would just be fidgeting and can I go now? I want to watch the telly. It sounds wonderful in a romantic way, but the reality is very, very different. Your problems are yours and you can overcome them.
Definitely.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question of going back to my original question? What is the purpose and practice of mediumship? Can you sum it up in a phrase, I guess?
Love.
Perfect.
That's it. You love being in this moment, love being who you are, love the fact that you're connected to absolutely everything that is, and realize more than that you're loved by this universe that is working through you, not just when you're working on the platform, but in every single second of your life. That's why it's called the present, because it's a gift. Live it.
And it's unconditional.
Yep. Totally unconditional. And that's why it's eternal. Because if it had any condition, it wouldn't be eternal. And that's that whole point about resurrection or life after life, is that the eternal is a natural aspect of that. It's a natural conclusion. Because if you're loved, you are eternal.
God, I feel like I'm glowing today. I'm like, yay, somebody else is the same as me.
I think somewhere in all of us, we know this stuff. Sometimes our hearts will accept less, but our hearts know this at its deepest level, that we're meant for more than this. And that, of course, is why we want to develop mediumship. It's why we want to, grow spiritually. It's because we know not just we're meant for more than this, but the world is.
Yeah. God, I just shoot love out everywhere.
But it can be said in such a glib way as well, can't it? It can be said, people can not just romanticize love, but over sentimentalize it, and then it becomes, not the reality of what love is. Sometimes love is messy.
Yeah.
You know that if you're caring for someone that's ill, it can be very messy, but it's getting in that messiness that you'll find God. God works from the bottom up. He doesn't work, it's a generalization, but we'll find God more, from the bottom up. In other words, he's at the ground of our being. He's in the difficulty. Teresa of Lisieux had this wonderful saying that where the people feel unloved, God rushes to be there because God is love. So to fill up that gap and that space. So we can find God more in our difficulties, you know, in that bottom aspect, you know, like that whole idea of helping the poor. It wasn't to transform the poor. We'll always have them. To transform me. I help other people to transform me. And you know, when you help other people, you know, that often they're not grateful, or they're not, you know, compliment, and they'll criticize and they'll tell you what you did wrong. You know, so like with our mediumship, you could give the best demonstration in the world and somebody'd go, yeah, but you've seen the shoes that he wears, you know, or something as silly as that. Yeah. You work as a medium, not to transform them, but to transform you.
Yeah.
So that you can give and be in that moment and share this joy that you've experienced. But if you give it as a gift, what they do with it is not up to you.
Yeah. Or say you give as good as you receive, don't you?
Yeah. Or hope to.
Yeah. But I always think like everything you do, if you look at it, there's growth even in the darkest of moments. Yeah. You know, it's like being in that big, dark, muddy puddle, isn't it? That's where the seed starts. And look how that grows and how beautiful it gets.
Yeah. And isn't that what mediumship proves, that there's beauty even in death?
Yes, definitely.
That's a
great place to end. There is that's its purpose, is to show us, and even in that bleakest, darkest moment, God is there, and that something good will come out of it, and that's eternal life.
Yeah. Leonard Tatt, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts.
It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. We'll have to get you back on again.
Great.
We'll do some more at some point. That'd be fantastic. Thank you, Leonard.
Thank you. Good to speak to you all. See you again soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.